And now, right to your hosts of Down the Garden Path, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing.
Hello and welcome to the 9th season of Down the Garden Path, where each week we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice while doing our best to help you seasonally manage your garden and landscape. I'm Joanne Shaw, owner of Down to Earth Landscape Design, and with me is my co-host and co-author, Matthew Dressing.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Matthew Dressing, owner of Natural Affinity Garden Design. As landscape designers and gardeners, we believe it's important and possible to have great gardens, which are sustainable and low maintenance, and we want to help you make it happen.
That's right. And with the gardens and days growing longer and the weather warmer, the itch to be outside in our garden is growing stronger. Makes it a perfect time to look at what's trending in 2023. Tonight, we welcome back Garden Media Group's Katie Dubow to share with us what's trending in 2000. Oh my goodness, this year's Garden Trends Report. Do you have a question for Katie about Garden Media Group or the 2023 Garden Trends Report? Perhaps you'd like to share what is trending in your area. Write us here at Down the Garden Path Podcast at hotmail.com. And please hang around for the end of the show for our new Stepping Stone segment, where Matt and I discuss what is happening in the garden now.
That's right. And so just before Katie joins us, for those of you who maybe haven't met Katie, a little bit about Katie. Katie Dubow is the president of Garden Media Group, a woman-owned and run public relations firm specializing in the home and garden industry and celebrating its 32nd year in business. Author of the annual Garden Trends Report, Katie travels the world scouting and presenting garden trends to audiences from Italy to Chicago. Katie lives and gardens in Westchester, Pennsylvania with her husband, 2 daughters, 1 dog, and 6 chickens. Find her in the garden with her children practicing yoga, dancing to Zumba, and her goal is to convince people that brown thumbs can, in fact, be turned to green. Welcome back to the show, Katie.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, we're so glad to have you back.
Yes, we definitely are. It's great.
And I actually, we're hatching eggs right now. So that 6 chickens has grown. We have 7 little babies who just hatched this morning. So very exciting.
Oh, that's very exciting.
Yep.
And because it's getting light out now, right? They start laying more.
We're doing the incubator. So
okay.
So we don't have a rooster. So we had to get these from a friend who has a rooster, but it's just adding to the flock. They really are one of the most fun pets I have ever had. They greet you when you run outside. They look like little ladies hiking up their skirts, running across the lawn. And they're companions as I garden. They're kind of like picking at grubs and stuff. They're fun to have out there.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
really
so
good.
much fun.
Yeah.
And definitely on trend, man. People picked up chicken keeping over the pandemic, didn't they?
They did. We had what was the chicken we did, Matt? The Rent-A-Chicken.
Yes, Rent-A-Chicken.
Have you heard of Rent-A-Chicken?
I've heard of similar things.
Yes. So yes, they were a guest on the show, and
Amazing.
That is what a concept. So you rent them for the season, and then you give them back at the end of the season, and they give you everything you need. What could be easier?
Yep. Wow.
So true. So what about for our new listeners or those who maybe aren't familiar with Garden Media Group? Can you start by telling us a little bit about what goes on in producing such a report?
Yes. So Garden Media Group was started by my mom, as you said, actually 35. This is our 35th year. So it's really exciting. That's okay. I mean, it's such an accomplishment, and I'm so proud to be able to have taken over in 2020. And of course, what a crazy year to have taken over as a new business owner. But what we like to say is, we help customers get their products in front of of the people who need them. And so we only work with brands in the horticulture space. And then about 22 years ago, she first started making the Garden Trends Report. And it was actually the Philadelphia Flower Show here where I am outside of Philadelphia is coming up in just a week and a half. And it was at the Philadelphia Flower Show that said, do you have a trend report? Could you make a trend report? So she created this report. And that first trend, there was just one, and it was France. That was the trend. Everything French would be trending that year. And that's how the report was born. And we've been doing it ever since on an annual basis.
Wow.
That's amazing. And now the Garden Trends Report, you've been doing it for so long. You guys have been able to actually very accurately some years predict what's like right down to the letter what's coming up.
We have. I mean, it's funny. Now there's a lot of people who do predict trends. And I love to see all of the different ideas that come out. And so it's one of my fun things to be like, oh yeah, we predicted that like 3 years ago, the one that you're saying. Vegetable gardens that were coming back. Now back in like 2007, 2008, we saw the rise of vegetable gardening. Young men, the rise of young men gardening was coming back because that was a pre-World War II thing where men were the big gardeners in the family. And so, at least in the United States. And so that we predicted. One trend we missed though, and I always make this joke, but was fairy gardening. We did not see that one coming. We missed it, and I'm not super sad about it.
Nice. So this year's report is titled "I Believe in Me." I think it's a very strong title. I can definitely feel the trend. Can you tell us how did you come into that title?
Well, what we do, the way that we make our trends is that, and we've already started, by the way, working on 2024. So it's basically as soon as we wrap the previous year, the trends report usually comes out about September. And so we like to figure out what all of our trends are before we determine what the overarching theme is going to be. And you guys have written a book, so I don't know if you did your title last. I've heard that from authors is that they have to write their title last. But we like to figure out what is that thread that ties all of these trends together. And for us this year, there were actually two driving forces. It was the expression of the individual, and then having that access. So self-reliance. So self-expression and self-reliance were two things that we were seeing throughout all of our trends, but also just out in mainstream society, that people were really wanting to have, to establish themselves, to create some sort of little identity in this crazy world that we live in. And then educating ourselves on how the products that we buy, the people we follow, how that represents who we are. And then, of course, personal empowerment. So we got through COVID, and I know that, it was a big struggle for a lot of people, but we really believe that coming into 2023, now here we are, gosh, oh Lord, almost 2 full months in, that this is going to be a year about really big personal empowerment. That if people learned how to grow their own food during COVID, what can't they do?
Definitely. And I think everybody's growing their own food. I think, Joanne, you're venturing into more growing your own food.
Yes.
I was showing off some of the food that I'm growing this year.
Awesome.
Oh,
yeah, I think it really, people also, one of the big trends we saw was people getting into herbalism and tapping into their roots, that individuality, but using the garden. That's one thing about our trends report is there are lots of trends out there, but the trend that's happening in society has to tie back to the garden. So we're not just doing an overarching trend report. We really want to know what's going to change their behaviors as it relates to how they interact with plants. And so we really saw a lot of that personal reliance and the concept that we've kind of learned we can't control what's happening externally from us, but we can control what we do, what we think, and what we buy.
Right.
Yeah.
So why don't we jump right in? I think that's a perfect segue. So what are some of these main points that make up this year's trends in the garden? How are we empowering ourselves and taking back our control?
So we have 7 trends this year. It usually varies between 6 and 10 trends. So we have 7 this year. And the first one is called the Tesla effect. And the way that our trends are, that we go through them is kind of like the biggest, the macro trend, the one that affects most people. And then it kind of whittles down to the smallest trend at the end. And so we really found that this idea of technology in the garden, which shockingly has never been a trend before. So we have never talked about technology in the garden. And truth be told, it's because it just really didn't exist. You know, we use smart devices for so much. In fact, we were just talking in the beginning of this about AI and the rise of AI. Like, it really is, the technology is moving so rapidly right now. It's really hard, I think, for us to wrap our brains around how quickly it's moving. And so, of course, we did not know that these things would exist when we came out with our trends report, but we really feel like this is the year that technology is going to make changes in our garden. And I know, you know, we mentioned the Seed to Spoon app by Park Seed in our trends report, and how apps are even making a comeback. But one of the things, the reason we call it the Tesla effect is because the truth is that the lawn and garden industry has gone electric or battery powered faster than any other industry, 3 times faster than the electric car industry. So I think people don't realize how quickly we have adapted electric lawnmowers, electric leaf blowers, or battery powered, you know, these tools that we use. And it really is changing the way that people look at their landscape. When I was in this summer, I was in a store and I was talking to a woman about our trends report, because I kind of just like to get everyone as we're sitting with them, you know, trying to get people's opinion. And she owned the store, and she was probably in her 60s, maybe a little older. And she told me that her husband had just passed away, and that she didn't know what she was going to have to hire somebody to maintain her lawn. And then she discovered her battery powered string trimmer and a battery powered leaf blower. And then all of a sudden she was telling me how much how empowered she felt, that she never was going to be able to pull that string to start one of these pieces of equipment. But now she feels like, you know, even though she misses her husband dearly, she feels that she can still move on, care for herself in a way that she never thought that she could. And that's something that, Lord have mercy, the lawn and garden industry gave to her, you know, so she really felt like she could do something and make a change. So I think that is really neat. And here in the States, you know, Canada is usually way ahead of us, but we're offering vouchers to make changes. So landscape companies and individuals to switch to lawn equipment. California is going to actually ban gas powered mowers in next year. Totally ban them.
Yeah, that's crazy. I can't imagine.
So I think that these smart tools that are becoming the norm now are what's going to take our little, you know, this hobby that we love really to the next level. And I think it's going to happen so much faster, like technology is moving now. I think it's just going to happen faster than ever.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite piece of technology in the garden yet?
Well, so this summer, I was introduced to a brand called Turtle, Tertill, and it is a robotic weeding device. It's a little mini string trimmer on wheels, basically. And so the research shows that chopping the heads off of weeds consistently is just as effective as pulling them. So I had it in my vegetable garden, which is mulched around raised beds. And sometimes many summers, the weeds in that mulch get so out of control, they're growing up into the raised beds, and I just can't keep up with them.
Yeah.
So I put this device, I actually got 2 because my vegetable garden's a little bit bigger. So I got 2, and they like a Roomba or these robotic vacuum cleaners. It moved around the garden, string trimming all of my weeds. Now, I did see a few, I saw that they were shorter, but it really saved me so much time. I was able to do the things that I love, which is not weeding. Call me crazy, Gary, see? But I was able to maintain my garden, and this made my life easier. So that's one thing that I discovered this summer. And I think that we're going to see more and more things like that evolve.
Absolutely. Now, I'm curious that it ran, I know the show's not about that device, but it went on top of the mulch and everything?
It did. It has kind of like big chunky wheels, and I would go out there every now and again, and it would have kind of dug itself a little hole, and I would just have to pick it up and move it. But solar powered. It's out there right now. It doesn't run, but I left it out all winter. We have not had that bad of a winter, so I don't know if you're supposed to do that, but no snow yet here.
You'll find out. You didn't have snow at all?
No,
I know we had. Oh, okay. We've had snow and then we've lost it, but it's melted and now it's a few times. So interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think even apps like the Spoon to Fork app are getting better and better. Yes. I know I've been using Google Lens to take a photo of a plant or a leaf for ID, no more flipping through books and taking the leaf and going back home and trying to figure out what it is compared to one of our books. like I think it's almost making us like want, just like any industry, want information instantly.
For sure.
And now we can do it.
Yes, you can do it. Then you can figure out if it is a pest, what kind of, what you need to do right there at your fingertips, what you need to do to control it. So I think in the long run, these kinds of tools are going to make us more successful. So the 18 million gardeners, or however many gardeners we got over the pandemic, I think they're very accustomed to using this kind of technology in their daily lives. Whether you're creating grocery lists or whatever, it's all operated from your phone. So I think that it's just a natural process for the garden. Of course we still want to check out. Of course we still want to be able to be in our garden, connect with nature, unplug from our devices. But I think the reality is that we always have that phone in our back pocket. And so to be able to identify something, make your life easier and make you more successful at gardening, that's a win-win for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it trumps, because I think people want everything in one place. So like that's unfortunately what the phone does. So even the pool, because they want to, when they've all the people not only are gardeners, but they put in pools, and they want to now control. They don't want to walk to the pool equipment like we do here in old school still, but they want it on their phone, or their lighting for their new landscape. They want it on their phone. So I think to have everything in one place, it's now become the phone, even though we do want to kind of disconnect, but we still go back to the phone.
Yeah, we do. We plug in to unplug.
That's right. That's right. Oh, that's a good way to say it. Oh my goodness. So you've also talked about the backdoor revolution.
Yeah, so that's our next trend. Also really, on that macro scale. I live here in a suburb of Philadelphia, and our housing market is still as hot as ever. I was just talking to a neighbor tonight, and the house came up for sale in our neighborhood yesterday. They had 6 offers today. Someone bid 50 grand over. So it is still this amazingly, and I know the market has slowed a little bit for sure, but the backdoor revolution really focuses on this housing shortage that we're experiencing right now. Even though that since we wrote this report, the housing shortage, or the crisis, has cooled, we still have a shortage of inventory. So there are more people who want to buy homes than are available. And people are still being priced out. I mean, home values have risen 32% in the past 2 years. So it's, and what that really does is it affects this millennial generation. So the experts predict that 73 million millennials, who are these first-time home buyers, who really would be active, putting in foundation landscaping, maybe hiring a landscaper to help them design a garden, or even care for their lawn, whatever, the very basic. Learn how to grow some containers and some vegetables. They don't think that group will return to normal until 2030. So we have a pretty long trickle effect of this housing crisis. And of course, it's affecting rentals as well. So how does this affect the garden industry? We're missing that middle of the market. And so we were researching, and we saw this really kind of different places, and this is how it works with trends, right? You see it one way. A garden center in Michigan actually sent me the term backdoor revolution. It just kind of comes from different places, and you realize this is happening all over the place, and it's going to affect our industry. So it's the accessory dwelling unit, or the ADU. And it's this pop-up little tiny home that people are putting in their yards to alleviate these types of shortages. And the magazine Forbes coined this year as the year of the ADU. So it's helping alleviate the shortages of housing, helping alleviate the mortgage costs of the person who bought this tiny little home, or, this home now for an exorbitant amount of money. It can help offset their mortgage costs. And it also allows people who maybe wouldn't be able to afford living in a great neighborhood, access to the best schools, close to their job, transportation, all of the great things about maybe a more expensive neighborhood. Now people can live in that neighborhood. Here in the States, what the big thing that was holding this back was zoning. And zoning reform is happening across the country. Portland, Oregon started in 2001. Houston, Texas was next. Minneapolis has legalized triplexes. So they did not have the ability to do that in the city. So cities all across the country here are changing their zoning and allowing people to have more impervious. What is it? I can never remember when the water can't seep through.
Impervious.
impervious surface than they were before. And so what that does for us is enables us to say, hey, you've got a neighbor right there, and you're sharing, maybe they're your child who has never quite left the home, maybe it's maybe it's a parent who's moving back in with you, but regardless, maybe you're renting it out. But privacy is really important for this particular situation.
Huge. Yeah.
And so it's container gardening, really, it's not new, right? Container gardening is not new. Vertical gardening is not new, but it's understanding the way that people are living now and figuring out how to help them design their spaces. So maybe they need more tall, things that can grow up, arbors, trellises, more petite plants. There's the knockout rose, which is an enormous, amazing, landscape shrub that's been around for 20, 30 years. Now they have a petite knockout rose. So things that are the great plants that we know and love that now work in smaller spaces. So really helping people understand you can still live up close to somebody. You can still have this great landscape, this beautiful landscape, and have privacy and make it feel really special. So that's what the backdoor revolution is. It's the changing the way that people are living, but helping them see that they can live still in these gorgeous oases.
Amazing. Wonderful. Yeah. And I love that it means the help with landscape designers, right? Because we love to, it is so much fun to design tiny spaces,
I bet I'm sure it's more of a challenge the smaller you're designing, but it's helping people make the most out of their space. And I think a lot of people just can't see it. And so they put up a fence and it's, oh gosh, just a fence. And then what can we do with that space? And I think it really is a landscape designer challenge to help people understand how people want to have beauty right outside their door.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the trend then also goes to they don't want grass. So because they've got so little space, they want to maximize it with plants. I had several of those last year, and I think that's a great trend right there.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're thinking of that for 24. I think we'll miss the boat. We might have missed the boat on it. We'll see once it comes out because we wanted to sneak it in this year. But man, everywhere I turn, I see this meadow or the idea of people replacing their lawns, and it makes me so excited.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Well, we've got a couple listeners who have written in, Carl and Kelly, both wondering where they might be able to find the Garden Trends report from Garden Media Group. I think they are anxious to follow along, perhaps, with some of our other listeners. Katie, did you want to just quickly say, where can they go? And is there anything they need to do to get the report?
Yep. So go to our website. It's gardenmediagroup.com. And if you do a /trends, it'll take you right to the report. But it's also right on our homepage. So if you just go to gardenmediagroup.com, you'll find the trends from there. And in fact, if you're really looking for some, fun Monday night activity, we have all 20 past reports on that homepage there. So you can see how we have been right about some and we've missed some others.
That's amazing. So gardenmediagroup.com to get your copy of the 2023 and all the other Garden Trends reports. Amazing.
That's right. And we'll also, of course, have a link in our show notes for the podcast for our listeners who are listening later.
That's right. So what is our next trend? We had our backdoor revolution. What's next?
Yep. After the backdoor revolution, we have one called accessible gardening. And of course, one of the big things we're talking about here is access. And this one is the one that's gotten people's feathers a little ruffled. So I'm curious what you guys and all you listeners think. I follow and admire a trend predictor named Faith Popcorn, and she has coined the term super agers. And she says that we are entering an era of this time of the super ager where it's 100 is the new 50. People are living longer and living healthier than ever before. They're living as their brains are functioning as if they were 30 years younger. They have longer ranges of productivity. They live in multiple locations, have multiple careers. And we look at the backdoor revolution, and we think this is a perfectly suited place for people, these super agers, to live. There are things that are happening that Faith predicts about virtual reality and augmented reality that I don't think necessarily apply to the garden industry. But one of the things that really stuck with me about this trend is a lot of our energy in marketing, not just in the garden industry, but in general, is so focused on millennials, Gen Z. It's really kind of forgetting the boomers. And this trend made me think, we have this amazing generation of people who have been loyal gardeners, very, very traditional loyal gardeners, and they're living longer than ever. And so how are we going to make sure that we understand what they need and how their needs are changing, and to make sure that we are tapping into that and giving them the products that they need? So in this case, we're looking at this idea of maybe nostalgia. So tapping into things that are comfortable from their past, things that are nostalgic for their past. Some of the things that we came across were, maybe this group took a honeymoon to Hawaii. So it's that mid-century modern. It's this plant that I just love, Royal Hawaiian Waikiki. It's a colocasia. It gives very much those Hawaiian vibes. So they're designing these gardens that tap into their roots. Millennials are doing this nostalgia, by the way, too, but they're not nostalgic necessarily for things that they ever had. They're buying vinyl. They're buying these records and turntables. So the nostalgia is not just about boomers. So if this is something that people are feeling or identifying with, or as a brand, if you sell products, you're not just focused on boomers here. Everyone kind of is loving this nostalgia, and being able to look back into our past. Things do always come around.
Yeah.
And then the other thing here we really want to help people remember is that, this group of super agers maybe has changed their zone. Maybe they don't necessarily know what it's like to garden in containers as much because they had an acre of land. And so we're thinking of the idea of landscape designers, and the idea of maybe also having a section of your business called a coach, a landscape coach, or a plant coach. Because this super ager thinks, well, I don't need a designer. I've been doing this for 40 years. I know what I'm doing, but maybe they need a little bit of coaching in understanding that new zone, as I was saying. And so it's something that we really think could help assist and appeal not just to the boomer generation, but certainly to a younger generation as they start to learn what it is to live in their yard. And maybe they think a landscape designer is not accessible to them, and they think it might be too expensive. So that entree point into helping them with their yard is just changing the name. It's just a coach and helping them have success.
That's great. What a great idea. Yeah.
Yes, that's a great idea. I can think of someone we both know that I think is a plant coach.
Cool. Very much so. But I think as designers, Matt and I know we are coaches too.
Exactly.
And I think anybody who looks into landscape design, they'll realize, you can you can spend good money buying all the wrong plants and wasting them, right? Like, absolutely. I think I've always, and I know I'm biased, but I think we save you money because it's the right plants, the right time. And one of the trends I can see with that is when they've been for 30 years on their 2 acres of property, and the plants that they planted 30 years ago, Wigilias, rosacea, they now there's better varieties, and they're, now if they're in a smaller space, there's plants that don't get as big. And so I think even, they know what they want, but they just getting help. And I think it is very cost effective to hire someone to help you, whether it's just with a plan on paper, or whether it is someone just to have a consultation and some coaching. It really pays for itself, because you plant the wrong things, and plants still are, they're an investment, right?
Absolutely.
And they still can die. They are a perishable good. It's different than interiors, right? You can mess it up, and if the couch doesn't look good, you can, or the table that, you can take it back or whatever, or put it somewhere else in another room. But when it comes to the garden, it still is perishable. So having someone that, suggests and maybe even warranties the plant in your yard, I think it can be a big help. Again, I know I come with a big asterisk on my comments.
Well, no, you're right. And the thing about the couch is always going to look the same in the room. It's never going to grow. The plants, I think people also can't wrap, especially if you're not experienced, the idea that, okay, this is what it looks like today, but what about 2 years, 3 years down the road? So that's what I think a coach or a designer obviously really helps people know, that this is for the long term here. You're making a big investment.
That's right. Because that becomes a challenge with the small plants, like they plant them still as far away as they would have planted the bigger ones.
Yes.
And then it's like, well, it's still not
These
growing. Like something's wrong.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to get as big. So so there's a lot of stuff that we can help with. And I think, and we pay for ourselves easily, I think. So
for sure.
So that's great. So I love that trend. I really do.
Great.
So as we hit the bottom of the hour, I'm going to just interject and say thank you, everyone, for joining us here live on Reality Radio 101. You're listening to Down the Garden Path. I'm Matthew Dressing here with my co-host and co-author, Joanne Shaw, and we enjoy hosting Down the Garden Path each week, bringing you interesting and relevant topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you from our research and from the wonderful guests that join us here on the show, such as Katie Dubow from the Garden Media Group, as we talk about 2023's Garden Trend Report. So don't forget, you can spend more time with us down the garden path. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Down the Garden Path Podcast is our handle there. And you can now find past and current episodes on YouTube as well. So don't forget to tune in to YouTube or your favorite podcast provider. Hit that subscribe button to be notified of new content. And please don't forget to like, share, and leave us a comment. We love hearing from you. As we continue into our discussion about the 2023 plant garden report and our trends, what is another one of our big trends moving through the 2023 year?
This next one was the last addition into the trends, and it's called Plant Talk, and it's about TikTok. And it's something that, to be honest, I was a little shy about joining TikTok. I can admit it, I am addicted to my phone. And so I'm on it already enough. Do I need yet another platform?
Yeah, I feel,
dive into. And so I was a little resistant, but I have a great team on, at Garden Media Group. We all come together for the trends. And I heard some of, particularly my younger staff say, TikTok, it plants and the word gardening is the 4th most searched thing on the app. And when I heard that, I thought, holy cow, we have got to be talking about this, because most of the people in the industry kind of ignore TikTok as well, like I was doing, but the customer who is out there is not. And so as we started researching it, we realized there's a lot of other industries that are doing this too. Restaurant industry was ignoring TikTok. A headline in the New York Times said, New York restaurants can't ignore TikTok anymore. And then I don't know if either of you have heard of Book Talk.
Yes.
So similar. Matthew, I feel like you're a big TikToker. Are you into TikTok?
You caught me red-handed. I love TikTok. There's Plant Talk and Book Talk and Trek Talk and all sorts of stuff. My partner cannot stand that I watch TikTok, period. I have to admit, I spend too much time probably looking at trends and what's happening in plants and all the other things on TikTok. Yes.
Yeah.
But he won't post videos himself. So
not yet.
Well, I think it's really interesting, so a couple stats about TikTok. Users spend an average of 52 minutes a day on the app, which is a lot of time, and 90% visit it more than once a day. And there's 1 billion monthly active users. So you're not alone, basically. There's a lot of people there on the platform. And one of the things that also got me was that people think it's just for the younger generation, or it's just dance videos, but it's not. People come to TikTok for like investment advice. We already talked about book recommendations. It's bringing books that were, bestsellers from 20 years ago back on the bestseller list, or it is helping authors who maybe don't have the big publishing house behind them. They're self-published, but it's helping them get their books in front of people who wouldn't have seen them otherwise. Cooking hacks. And of course, garden advice. So it's huge in the garden. As I mentioned, people are walking around doing tours of garden centers, talking about their favorite plants, the cat in the garden center, and who's not tagged in that because they don't exist on TikTok, that garden center. So, it people making content for our industry, and we're just, it's going into the void because a lot of the people aren't even seeing it to be able to thank them or share it. So There's a lot of great people that we love on TikTok, including Matthew. Do you want people to follow you? Do you share your handle on this podcast?
I haven't, you know what, I haven't, but it'll probably just be eventually at Natural Affinity Designs. I honestly haven't even signed up my own business yet. Joanne, I think you've signed up though, yes?
Yes, Katie GMG. So I have one, and we've worked with some TikTokers this year. Native Plant Talk is one of my favorites. So he's got,
that would be a good one.
Hundreds of thousands of followers. And we worked with him on a video that got 2 million views. So that's the other interesting thing about TikTok, unlike our other social media platforms, is that you do not have to have a ton of followers in order to get seen. The democratization has changed a little bit here. So TikTok has a For You page. So when you log right on, it shows you things that you have shown interest in before. Don't ask me what that interest is. Is it your eye, like a smile? I don't know. And I know that we talked about technology before this, but there is a secret algorithm that shows what you're interested in. It's not even just liking the content. So this content shows up on the For You page that might all be about plants. Mine's all about plants and chickens and some parenting hacks. And you discover these people that might only have 10,000 followers, but their videos have millions of views. So it's really interesting in that way, where you're not trying to just get followers, you're trying to produce really interesting content. And that's where Plant Talk comes in. There's some really interesting content there where we talk about our overarching trend of self-expression, where we're seeing a lot of kind of micro trends happening on Plant Talk. One of them that we're seeing is called Gnome Core. So it's this idea of people living their lives in this kind of cozy, self-care, that they're good and sensible people. They're living their lives as if they were gnomes, not like dressing up as gnomes, but just the idea of whimsy and eclectic and gardens filled with bold textures and textiles and art. And just the idea of how people, if we were gnomes, this is what our TikTok would look like. So it's really, really fun and lighthearted. We're also seeing in the Plant Talk space the trend of witch talk, which is huge. Over 20 billion views on the hashtag witch talk. And it's not, people casting spells, it's people passing down inherited knowledge and the idea of ceremony and ancestral roots, and people really talking about things unique to their region. And they're using herbs, they're growing herbs to make teas. And it is just a really beautiful thing. Of course, there's some magic in there, but it is this idea of ritual and how plants tie into that ritual. And then the last trend that we're seeing on Plant Talk specifically is moon gardens, which are not new at all by any stretch. But you're seeing this idea of the mindfulness spirals or planting by the phases of the moon, all these things that have been around forever, but it's trending. We also use Google Trends sometimes when we see a term. We look on Google Trends to see what Google thinks about it, and they tell you when a trend they think has peaked or will peak. And Google said moon gardens are peaking in 2023, which blows my mind. I'm like, we've been talking about it for hundreds of years, but this is their year. So it's really neat to think about how people are either creating new things on TikTok or finding some of our old things that we've always loved.
Because moon gardening would be very much an indigenous, people's, the way that they treated the land, that type of thing. And I feel like with climate change, we should really be, asking and learning more from people who've been here the longest on our land,
and are so much more attuned with nature, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. So yeah, that is very interesting because I attended a talk a few years ago from an indigenous lady talking about gardening by the phases of the moon. And it was fascinating.
Fascinating. I have read a lot about it too, because especially growing flower bulbs, they say there's a certain, as the moon is waxing or waning, you plant them, and your garlic, a lot of bulbs really it has to do with too. But I fully believe in that. People have been doing it for a reason for so long.
Yes. If it isn't broke, right? Why fix it? Yeah. Definitely. Oh my goodness. So I'm kind of curious about the next trend, all Greek to me. So is that kind of tie in with your mom's France from 21 years ago?
It does. You're the first person to make that connection, but yes. So we also use Pinterest. And Pinterest has an annual trends report they put out every year. And it was maybe 5 years ago that really gardening started showing up on their trends, and it was water gardens. And so we thought, that's interesting. It didn't make it in our report because it was not something that we saw kind of in other areas of what our research showed, but we started to pay attention to Pinterest. We thought this is super cool that they're, typically a home or a party planning, let's say, type site, and gardening is starting to show up there. So ever since then, they've had a huge section of that report devoted to your exterior and the things that people are searching for their exterior. And so this year, we were reading through it and discovered that Generation Z is really into Grecian design. And one of the things that really caught my attention was that they're embracing this trend more than ever. They're putting up statues in their yards, and boxwood hedges are seeing a revival. And I thought, are you kidding me? This is crazy. And then, of course, in my private life, I have friends who have asked me constantly last year, I need an evergreen hedge. I need an evergreen hedge. I need an evergreen, I need something new that's evergreen. And then there's one other thing that we wanted: gravel gardens. Gravel gardens are also having a moment, but they weren't quite big enough to be their own trend. And so we thought, oh, this is it. Greece is the word right now. And the idea of this scrappy garden, the Mediterranean style. Of course, we love native plants and we've talked about them for years, but how can we figure out how to get native plants in every year? Really, that's our little secret. And this is another way to figure out, like in the Mediterranean climate, these plants are drought tolerant. So figuring out what your native region is, what your native plants are, but drought really is pushing itself eastward. Our western part of North America, as I think is more southwestern, of course, is more accustomed to drought and harvesting gray water, but that's not something that we've done out here on the East Coast.
Right.
But this summer here in Philadelphia, we had the driest summer on record. So it's something that we're really going to need to figure out how to grow and adapt to have more drought tolerant plants. And gravel gardens is one really, really fun way that we found people are doing this. I don't know if you've seen or if you guys have designed any gravel gardens.
I haven't, but I've noticed it on Instagram. I have to say, I've noticed a few, and I was kind of like, that's interesting. Because I think I've had clients ask for it because they think it's low maintenance, which it is not. Because so I think I've convinced 2 this past year to go to mulch instead of gravel. So I guess in a way I've been asked for it, but I because they do think it's still, weeds still grow and it's not for everybody. So
it is not for everybody.
So my whole down to earth, like I'm just very practical with my advice. So and I always say, like, even with river rock, right? Like they go down by the bag, but when you have to get it out, it's a lot more work, right?
A lot of work. And that's what one of my colleagues whose partner works at a botanic garden and she has a gravel garden. She said, I want people to know that it's a lot of work to get it established. It could take 3 years, but once it is established, they look great in the heat. They're, require less inputs, fertilizer, water. And so it does in the end require less maintenance, but it is a bit of work to get it set up. And I think that someone helped me understand, if you live in a really hot climate, the gravel can actually reflect the heat. So it's definitely not for everybody, but it's helping people, maybe as we were talking about lawns earlier and getting rid of the grass and figuring out, if you can't grow grass, making sure that you can have a place that plants can thrive and grow. That's the big thing here, right? Let's get rid of turf and put in some more native plants.
Yeah,
definitely. Speaking of things drought moving eastward, our next trend, I think you call it redrawing the map. Does that have anything to do with?
It does. And this, I know, it's like children. I'm not supposed to pick a favorite, but this one is my favorite. So redrawing the map talks about the shifting hardiness climate zones and, whatever zones, wherever you live, you understand that the weather is wacky. We were talking earlier about how here in Pennsylvania, we would have had feet of snow already, and we've had none. It was 65 degrees today. So it's going to be 73 on Thursday. So it really is, it's just wild. And yes, climate change is happening, but what are some of the solutions and what are some of the challenges besides these insane weather events, earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes? We know that trees are a big solution, one of the solutions to helping us fight this warming climate. But we've got damage from heat and stress. All of our plants are also finding themselves in kind of an uncomfortable situation. And our perennials, we can figure out which perennials will work for our area within 3 years, right? We can regrow perennials. Shrubs, maybe within 5 years, but we cannot do the same thing with our old trees. And so it's really important that we figure out what our trees of the future are, because trees are a big thing that are going to help us mitigate this climate change. But the trees that we are planting today may not survive the next 100 years of our climate. So we work with the Davy Tree Expert Company, and they have offices all over North America. And they did some research as to what those trees for specific regions will be the ones that will thrive in the next 100 years. And so we need to make these informed decisions about what trees we're planting now, plant more of them. Of course, we need to care for our big old trees that we already have. But there's a forward-thinking public gardens have, there's one in Maine that has a Trees of the Future exhibit. And so they're educating people who live in Maine about what trees they should be planting. And it's changing. So people who could plant beech now are planting maples, or, it's not as simple as that always, but it is a new palette of trees. And it's a really great thing to help people understand that this green infrastructure could really help us have the climate change resilience.
Wow. Is the switch to native trees then? More native trees versus?
Certainly more native trees, but we're looking at some of the state trees that we have here in the States and looking to see, are they not going to necessarily anymore be the ones that thrive in the future? So certainly some native trees will be part of that, but also different zones. So we can grow warmer trees here now. The trees that survive in maybe a zone warmer than me will survive here, but not necessarily trees that need a frost, so things like that.
Fascinating.
But one of the really important points about these, million tree, as we started doing this research, there are a lot of these billion tree planting initiatives. And so we kind of stumbled upon a few articles about the dark side of those, and that it's those trees that are planted. You think you're doing something good by buying from a company that says they plant a tree for every purchase, but the average tree lives for 2 to 3 years. So yes, it's doing great things for our industry by selling trees, but we need to really help people understand not just the right tree, what is that tree of the future, but as you guys, I'm sure preach, planting it the right way and choosing the right place. So really figuring out right tree, right place, and planting it in the right way. And then caring for it. That's a big part of these trees' success, is making sure that they do get that long-term care so they live for the next 100 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people realizing that it's not planted and done, even if it's planted by somebody else for them, because I know I have a client that we're going to do a planting this year, and their one request was that they, be installed early spring. Everybody wants early spring, but it was because they were going on a trip in mid-May. So they'd be away for 3 weeks. So they wanted everything planted before they went away. So during our Zoom call, I kind of explained to them that, I think it'd be best if we waited until you returned, and, the importance of watering it, and that first few months for sure are very important. And they had started thinking that way as well. So they said, yeah, we were wondering about that. So now we will plant, the end of May when they are back and home to kind of baby the trees. But that happens a lot. We will, and sometimes they don't even tell tell us, we're just finishing putting in their landscape, and they, like, on a Friday, and then they say, oh, we're going to the cottage tomorrow for the whole week, like next week. Literally, we've had to get people to have like arrangements to have neighbors water, or me or a contractor's gone back to water. So I think that's something, people forget that they are living, and they do need care, especially when they first go in, but even after that.
Yep. I know people always ask, one of the big questions that this Davy Tree Company gets asked is, do I still need to water my big trees? And it's, it all depends, of course, is the answer.
Yes.
But how much rain have you had? Are you in the drought? We've had, like I've mentioned 1,000 times, no snowpack this year. Yes. So our trees are surely going to be going into spring struggling a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And the big tree, something Matt and I always make sure we stress, and we do talk about it in our book, is the drip line. So you will see, if you go down an established neighborhood in a drought, summer, you will see somebody out there watering the trunk of their tree, and God bless them, but that's not where the roots are, and that's not where the water needs to be. So you need to look up and look at where the drip line is, and if that's your lawn. So sometimes you're killing two birds with one stone, right? You're watering your lawn, but you're really watering the tree. So, Oh my gosh. Love reminding people of that, right?
I knew we would get along. I literally have been known to stop and do two things. One, if someone is just spray watering all of their plants, just the leaves, I've been known to stop and kindly tell them how it's done. And also stop when people are volcano mulching. I have told landscapers, you should not volcano mulch a tree. Yeah. So you don't want to be taking a road trip with me.
Yeah, for sure. And I take invasive plants out of their cart at the nursery. And no, you don't want to buy that. No, you don't want to buy that. Yes. Yeah. So
we're just good stewards.
I know. So sometimes knowledge is, they say knowledge is power, but
annoying.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, for sure.
Well, we've come to our last trend.
Yes, we have.
So this is always the most anticipated, which is so funny to me. Pantone does a color of the year, and in 2020, so our 2021 report, we left it out. It didn't feel like, I wanted to pick gray, and it was I don't really feel like naming a color this year. And people were like, no, we want the color. So I think it's just really fun. We're not expecting anyone to go out and change their entire, backyard, all their accessories, paint their walls. But really, it is fun to look and see what the color trends are for the year. And this year we were going back and forth between a deep, a bright red, and what we ended up choosing, which was terracotta. And I'm really glad we chose terracotta, even though Pantone did choose their magenta. I think that this idea of earthy tones is what we just kept seeing over and over again, the earth tones, the calming nature of it. And when we were thinking about our overarching trend, this individuality, for us, that connection with the earth, it all really tied in. Mm-hmm. And the first time I gave this presentation in front of an audience and I said terracotta, the audience oohed and awed. And I have never, I've been watching my mom do this for 20 years. And the last 10, and I have never had an audience ooh, when you say terracotta. So I think as an industry, obviously it's a very special color for us, but it's also a color associated with warmth and excitement. And I think that the other thing here is urging people to think outside the box when it comes to color. So our terracotta, not just pots. So of course we've got amazing terracotta pots, but think about your plants. So, the Adobe orange coneflower, Tacoma red hot, copper top sweet viburnum. So if you deadhead the viburnum, the new color that comes back in fall is this terracotta color. So what are some of your plant palettes that you could pick that are in these earthy tones? And so that's what we're really urging people to try to think about. Maybe your pots will have a center stage, but also think about this color for your plant palette too.
Wow, that is really neat. Yeah. And I think that terracotta also ties in with the Greek theme as well, right? Because they're European, Mediterranean.
Definitely.
You see them on all the balconies, they're growing, they're tropical, they're olean, so yeah.
Yes, someone else made that. I forgot to bring that up too. Absolutely. It definitely ties into that Grecian theme and that idea of that Mediterranean earthy tone colors.
Amazing.
Excellent. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. That was so fun.
That is always fun. It's always fun having you here and joining us on the show to talk about all the amazing trends. I think Joanne and I, as well as all of our listeners, learned so much about what's coming up and kind of looking beyond the page or just outside the box. So thank you again, Katie, for joining us here on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. And thank you for guiding us too, because I think it really helps Matt and I kind of, figure out what we want to talk about on the show. So, and we have already, because of course we had advanced copies of the Garden Trends. So thank you very much for inspiring us.
Of course. Indeed. And I love being on, and I love being able to share this with you guys.
Excellent.
I'll send you the booking invite for 2024 after the show.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. And so, everybody who's listening, we will definitely have the Garden Media Groups /trends for you to go and check out this year's report, as well as all the other year's reviews or reports as well. And don't forget, we'll also have in our show notes all the other Garden Media Group links. They have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and many more. So definitely check out Katie and the Garden Media Group and all the amazing information they have there.
And TikTok.
And TikTok. Of course, I was going to say that, yeah.
I didn't do TikTok. Okay, I have to add TikTok. And I don't know how I missed it. So as we come to the end of the show, do we have time to do stepping stones, or do we want to just...
I think so. Well, why don't you mention your peanuts?
One of our tips is definitely, there are some things that we can start looking for seeds and going out and buying some seeds. Now is the great time to grab a good selection. I was saying to Joanne and Gary just before the show, I have a pinstriped Ecuadorian peanut that I like to grow. I was testing some. So if you've got some of those longer day plants, maybe starting to think, planting that garden, planting your vegetable space when you may or may not need to start them inside. So take a look at the seeds. I just planted some now. They take 140 days, which is going to be July 10th for me. But I can use the rest of the year as well to plant another crop. So definitely take a look at your seeds, get your space planned out. You were saying, as we were talking about the peanuts, you've just gotten your space and your lights all ready and set up.
Yeah. So in the past, I've always done it backwards, and then I've started the seeds in, just on a whim, and then it's like they start to grow, and it's like, I need to get my lights and blah blah blah. So this time I was a little bit more organized and set up the rack, and I think we found a more permanent place, so I don't have to keep scrambling every year. I was doing it just on my dining room table for a few years, but now I actually have a rack with 2 sets of lights, and I did set that up in our, what we call our workroom at home. So I have that all ready to go, and I've washed out the containers. I love those plastic containers, that mushrooms come in.
Yeah.
So I saved a bunch of those.
Clamshells.
Yeah, the clamshell ones, but also the blue ones, they're kind of plastic. So, because I found the seed tray, because I'm only doing a little bit of different things. So, right, the bottom of the mushrooms, those containers. Yes. So it was easier because I find when I use a big sheet or a big, I want to say pan, but a big plastic tray, then I forget what things are, and the labels get moved and the tags. So I feel like it's easier if I keep all the same seeds the same in those containers. So I like that. So now is the time we talk about it in our book and Down the Garden Path in February. That's seed starting. Don't start too soon, but definitely check the back of your packages for the time to start. And sweet potato vine as well. That's another thing we can talk about, because next week we're talking about March in the garden.
That's right. Lots of tips to grow what's coming up as we continue our discussion next week here on the Down the Garden Path, live on Reality Radio 101. We will see you all next week. Thank you for tuning in.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Down the Garden Path with your host, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101.